Hi, I'm Blake Rayhans.
And I'm Stacie Mallon.
And you are listening to the Optimized AF podcast.
We know life is hard. We're here to make it simple.
Welcome back to another episode of the Optimized AF podcast. I am Blake Rayhans.
And I'm Stacie Mallon, and today we have a guest with us, which is always exciting for us. It's our second guest ever, or first guest, depending on the order of operations.
Potato.
That goes out of this.
We might release Tom ahead of Brian. We don't know yet.
Either way, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah. Well,
we got the wonderful Tom Frank with us today.
We do. And Tom and I have known each other for quite a while. I don't even remember how long. I say that a lot. I have a bad memory, apparently. But one thing that always comes to mind is we were at Startup Week. This is probably 4 or 5 years ago. And they asked Tom and I randomly to actually present together, not knowing that we knew each other. And we both got the email, and it
was a surprise to me.
Yeah. And so then we decided to kind of amalgamate. There's a strategic word.
Oh, wow.
Woo!
Where's the swear jar? Jeez. Oh.
Reconfigure, redo our topic. And we ended up being the rebel, which is me, and the troublemaker, which was Tom. And it was so much fun to be up there with Tom, Frank, and be, stirring it up at Startup Week, which was awesome for Yes PHX. So I'm so glad that you're here, Tom. We want to learn a lot more about you and the work that you do for organizations. We're going to talk a little bit about your history, which I think is incredible and relevant for right now for a variety of reasons. Tom is a great storyteller, so we wanted to have him on to tell some stories, and a story that
well, I think it's interesting though, right? Because Tom, you're one of the original founding members of the PF Chang's franchise.
Right.
Yep. Interesting. And I think this is where you were going, Stacie. There's a story that Stacie shared with me, gosh, years ago when Stacie and I first met, before Tom, you and I had a chance to meet, or even, I knew could put a face to the name and everything like that. And she shared the story with me. And I think that's maybe where we were going to get into right now, right?
Yeah, I think, this episode is a little bit migrating from personal optimization, and we're going to flow back and forth all the time because it's an inside out job, which is what we talk about all the time. But we're going to talk a little bit about companies and the companies we've worked in, and where we've really fostered and elevated the experience for people inside of those companies. But a topic that comes up all the time is culture. And so I retell the story that Tom tells about PF Chang's and of South Park even notoriety, which we'll put on the YouTube link and link back out of this particular kind of segment of the PF Chang's business, the experience that Tom really created. And when people ask me about culture and what is culture, I tend to give Tom all the credit, but also tell the story, because I think it's a hard thing to put your finger on what culture actually is and what it means, especially from a company standpoint. What does it mean to be inside of an organizational culture? But Tom tells this story. So that's a lot of buildup. So I apologize in advance. That was a lot of buildup. But Tom, can you share with us a little bit about the sauce?
What was the experience with the consultants?
Before we get to that, because we need to kind of lead into that a little.
Okay.
And you said something interesting when you talked about the PF Chang's franchise. And I think it's really important that everybody understands that I wasn't a part of the PF Chang's franchise. What we were doing is we were opening one restaurant in Scottsdale, Arizona. We never really talked about opening more than one restaurant. And so there was never any focus about it becoming what it ended up becoming. And so I think they gave us a lot of freedom to just create and to do, to try to find new ways to build the restaurant. And I think one of the reasons why we became successful so quickly is because early on at the very beginning, we developed not only a recipe for the food, but we developed a recipe for the culture. So when we started going around opening more restaurants, not only were we bringing with us the recipes that we used to make the food that people loved, but we also had a clear understanding of the belief systems, the paradigms that we were going to set in place to create a culture. And I think that really allowed us to open more quickly. I think And that's what I've been doing with other companies, is helping them understand what their recipe for culture is.
I love that analogy. I think that's so great, because a culture really it's not one ingredient. It can't have one ingredient turn out a culture and a wonderful dish, right? It is a recipe, and it's a recipe of precise ingredients and measurements and things that go into it.
Right. And I want to, one thing I like to talk about is when we're talking about especially ethnic cuisine, the single most important ingredient in creating ethnic cuisine is respect. Respect for the culture that created it, respect for the grandmas that served it to their grandchildren, respect for the chefs that made it popular, respect for the land that it comes from. And that when there isn't enough respect in the food that you eat in a restaurant, you might not know what's missing, but I promise you'll know something's missing.
Yeah. Isn't that why this saying exists? Like, why does this taste so good? It's like, well, it was made with love.
Yeah, well.
It's the same thing, right?
Or respect.
Or respect.
And I feel the same way about culture, is that when you develop a culture, an intentional culture, where you understand that the ingredient that you're putting into this is respect, I think that you're going to be able to taste it in the food. When I go into a restaurant that has a good culture, I can tell, because the food tastes better. And when you go into a restaurant that doesn't have a great culture, where the employees are just not glad to be there, you can taste that in the food too.
I remember going to P.F. Chang's. This is probably, what year did you guys start?
93.
93. So this is late 90s for me, Scottsdale. And it was an experience to go to P.F. Chang's. And I think you told us yesterday the whole impetus was to really to start a restaurant as a single restaurant, as you just described, and to bring, Chinese food and kind of this cuisine to people. Because back in the, I don't know, for those of you who weren't here in the 90s, this was not a very, Phoenix was not a highly cultured place. We were still on the upswing, very kind of juvenile in our perspective about food. It was a lot of, fast food, a lot of only chain sort of restaurants. We've evolved a long way since then, and I hope we continue to evolve, because it's part of why I love being here. So as you guys launched this restaurant and started down that road, what were the elements for you that made it special?
Well, first of all, we had a lot of questions, more questions than answers. And we really dived into those questions. Were people going to drink wine? So what we decided is not to be a Chinese restaurant. We wanted to be a great restaurant that served Chinese food. And so we really understood, because of Philip Chang, what great Chinese food was and how to create great Chinese food. But now it was about, what is a great restaurant, and how do we create a great restaurant to deliver this amazing food? And so we were very clear about what we were trying to do. And I call it the experiment, because they allowed me to incorporate a lot of my philosophies. Okay, so here's what happened with the sauce.
The sauce.
I know you want me to tell the sauce story.
For anybody who used to go to P.F. Chang's, this was part of the experience.
They don't even do it anymore.
Well,
No.
maybe you could start with, because I think this is a missing part of the story. I've heard the story a couple of times, but I don't know. There's consultants involved in this story, but I don't remember what were they called?
There weren't consultants, and I'll explain the story.
Okay.
And it really goes way back to when I was a kid, because whenever we would go out for Chinese food, I had two brothers and a sister, and we would go to a Chinese restaurant, and we would have a little competition to see who could make a sauce, or the spiciest sauce, to dip our dumplings in, because we would always get dumplings. And it was just something we did as a family. So when we started P.F. Chang's, I started teaching that to the bartenders and waiters to create their own sauce, and to make a competition to see whose sauce was better. And so they started doing it, and it started catching on. It started becoming a thing. As a matter of fact, it kind of got weird, because customers were like, wait, honey, wait, stop. Look, he's making a sauce. He's making the sauce like it was Cirque du Soleil. I just never really understood it. But the waiters and the bartenders got very competitive. Well, my sauce is great. I've got the best sauce. I remember one customer telling one of the waiters, could you ask that waiter over there to come over and make a sauce for us? And he's like, what do you mean? My sauce is better than his sauce. And so it became a thing. It became very popular. And then when we went into the new restaurants, and I opened the second restaurant in Newport Beach, and we started growing, we taught people the idea of creating a sauce for your customers. Now, there's some other background to it, because it creates what I call legitimate FaceTime, which is a good reason to be in front of your customers, because FaceTime is really important to developing a relationship and to telling your story. Okay, so we started growing. I think we were at the fourth or fifth restaurant, and we had a CEO come in, Rick Federico, great guy, and he started hiring people. But he started hiring people from the corporate world, from Brinker and Darden and things like that, to come in. And he said, he put me in charge of developing them and to training them. And so I remember flying into Denver, Colorado, and they had 6 brand new managers, all of them from Brinker. Now, I'm not a corporate restaurant guy. I didn't come from that background. And so I'm sitting there and I'm going over everything with them. And one of them stops and says, so Tom, tell us what the ingredients for the sauce is. And I said, well, it depends on which person is making it. I mean, like, everybody kind of makes it their own, and it's a little different. And I could see that look in their face, like, that's going to have to change. Like, if we're going to grow this company, we need to know.
They were striving for consistency and something that could be replicated.
Just had to, that wasn't going to work. So somebody else said, okay, well, what are the ingredients that are supposed to go into the sauce? I knew this wasn't going to go over well either. And I said, it really doesn't matter. I mean, every waiter, waiters use the soy sauce and the vinegar and chili and different things, but different people bring things from the kitchen. I know the bartenders sometimes would put bourbon in it or tequila in it. Everybody has a different ingredients that they use in their sauce. And now I'm losing these people, because these are corporate people and they needed a sauce. They need the recipe, they need the ingredients. So someone else said, well, when are they supposed to make the sauce? Like, I knew that this was trouble. This wasn't going to work. And I looked at him and I said, no, they don't really have to make the sauce. And you could see that shocked look in their face. And I said, okay, wait. What if I was a waiter and I didn't make the sauce for my customers? What would you do? Would you write me up? Would you fire me? What would you do? And one of them very proudly said, I think I'd write you up. And I said, okay, then I'll make the fucking sauce. And they were shocked. And I said, what the fuck do you want in the sauce? What are the fucking ingredients? When do you want me to make the fucking sauce? And they were shocked. And I said, do you want them making something special for the customers? Or do you want them to make your fucking sauce? Because that's what's going to happen if we turn this into a recipe. I mean, good waiters will make a sauce for the customers. That's clear. So don't fire them for not making the sauce. Fire them for not being a good waiter. But don't tie it into that, because we were trying to create something special. So explain to me, why is that to you the definition of culture? Why did that really resonate with you?
I think sometimes it's really hard to explain the feeling, what culture is. And for me, culture is about, to some degree, how it feels when you walk into an organization, or you're now on a call with an organization, or what the dynamic and the chemistry and what are the foundational aspects, to your point just a few minutes ago and right now about the sauce. What are the foundational elements that are the belief system of the organization, and that then dictates to a great degree how people perceive the organization, how people are treated in the organization. And again, people from the world of HR go right to this kind of litigious, reactionary behavior of writing people up and doing other things, or having an 80-page handbook. And then that becomes the culture. The culture is a culture of rules. The culture is a culture of what not to do, a culture of blame, a culture of not having direct, hard conversations. And so I think when you tell that story, for me, it resonates around what culture is, before we can talk about optimizing culture and all the different things you can optimize culture, is what is culture? And when I think of that, I think of all the stories that you tell in your journey in working with organizations. And maybe it's because restaurants and service is the results are very easily felt. I think interactions are more direct. It's more overt. It's more obvious than if you're in a big office of a consulting agency, or, things happen behind the scenes, right? Direct service is one of the easiest ways to see and to feel what the culture of that organization is. So you can taste it in the food, to your point. You can feel it on how people are treated, how people show up for their customers, how the hostess interacts with you, how the people in the kitchen. And we've said this on the pre-show. We've all worked in restaurants. I was a waitress, and I also was a bar back for a period of time and a bartender for a period of time. And so I think what also resonates for a lot of people, Tom, is a lot of people started at some point, or in some point in their lives, worked in that arena. And so it's an easy thing to kind of pull people back into as a highly relevant kind of reference point. And at least everybody's experienced a restaurant. Everybody's been in a restaurant and been a customer in a restaurant. So I think that's one of the reasons, a lot of the reasons why I like that story. PF Chang's is, grew from one restaurant to a very large chain. Let's not get into that. Yes. But that's what happens, right? What happens is what was held so closely as a belief system.
Not only did they need a recipe, but they ended up eliminating it because I think probably some consultant came in and said, that sauce is costing you a lot of money, without really being able to evaluate how much it's bringing to the experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's a correlation that I think that I remember hearing, or maybe made up in my own mind, is you've got the outside party coming in this case, either whether it was the 5 or 6 managers that were coming in to be part of the organization, or it was the consultant later on down the road, that are completely missing the point of what was behind it. The first group, they just wanted consistency. They wanted it to be replicable in all of the experiences of every single guest that came in. They wanted that guest to have the exact same experience regardless, which is pretty much the standard in most restaurant operations.
We have a lot to talk about.
And then they've got the consultant coming in who's just seeing the dollars and cents and saying, well, great, you've got a lot of this product waste. This server uses way too much. You have no consistency. And they're missing the complete point of what was behind the motivation of the sauce. It was to create a personalized experience for the guest.
And this is why Stacie called me a troublemaker. I call my company Round World Management because I've always been a round world thinker, and it's gotten me into an incredible amount of trouble in my career being a round world thinker, because I've worked for so many flat world companies, and I've worked for so many flat world people, and believe me, being a round world thinker has gotten me into trouble. But I have to, in order to explain that, I need to define the difference between a round world company and a flat world company. To me, flat world companies manage through policies and procedures and rules and regulations. And when they have a problem to solve, or they've got an issue that they have to deal with in their company, the question they ask themselves, okay, what's our policy on that? Like, what is the rule? And if, God forbid, they don't have one, because then they have to have a bunch of meetings about what is the policy going to be. And
a policy committee. We need a policy committee.
Yeah, we need a policy committee. We need a policy meeting, and we need a new policy for that. But to me, round world companies manage through their values and their beliefs and their guiding principles. And so when a round world company has a decision to make or a problem to solve, the question they ask themselves is, what do we believe about this? How does the solution that we need to create for this fit into our values, and how does it fit into our aspirations for the company and our goals? And to me, I've always been a round world thinker from the very beginning, because like in the restaurant business, I always knew there was a better way to run restaurants. Like I knew it was, you said you worked in restaurants. I worked in restaurants. I knew it wasn't supposed to be us against them. I worked in restaurants where the culture was so bad that it was the front of the house against the back of the house, or it was the managers against the employees. I've even worked in restaurants, Stacie, where it was us against the customers. Like I was 16 years old bussing tables right here in Phoenix. I even knew that had to be wrong. There's just no way it could be us against the customers. But that was the culture. And so what I've learned in my work is that my definition of culture is pretty easy. Culture is as culture does. Like, culture is what exists. Culture isn't the poster on the wall. It's not what the committee came up with. It's not what's in the training manual. Culture is what exists. So if you have a poster on the wall that says we are a drug-free business, and you've got employees selling crystal meth out back to other employees, you're not a drug-free restaurant or a drug-free business. And everybody knows it, maybe but you, because your employees know what your culture is. Your culture is as culture does, and your employees know what that culture is. It's that amazing Howard Moskowitz saying, he says, to a worm in horseradish, the whole world is horseradish. Well, your culture is their horseradish. And if you're not aware of what that is, then you're fooling yourself. If you say somewhere in all your manuals that we're a culture of respect, but you have one manager, just one manager that's disrespecting or bullying their employees, then you are not a culture of respect. And to the employees that work with him, everything else that you say you are loses credibility. And so your culture actually has to have some credibility. It has to coincide with your belief systems and what you want it to be. Yeah. And that's the work that
I think that takes the form in action, right? You're saying culture is as culture does. The word does is it shows up in action, right? If you've got that employee, that manager who is being disrespectful but allowed to maintain their position in the company, that's inaction that does not correlate with the culture that you're saying you have, right? And that happens
or even worse
often.
than that, they might be being promoted because they're good at sales.
Well, their restaurant's doing tremendous, right? Look at their numbers. We should make this person president of the company. No, you're actually making things worse because you're telling everybody else that the stuff we talk about doesn't matter. It's results that matter.
Yeah, and I say often culture is what a CEO tolerates as well. You know,
Absolutely.
in working with leaders, and Matt Lakins is one of the CEOs I've worked directly with. I remember the very first challenging situation we had, a high growth company, you know, and I went into him and he didn't ask me what the policy said. He didn't ask me what the handbook said, probably because we didn't have one. He just looked at me, he said, "What's the right thing to do?" And I think once you work in that environment, I think what's been challenging for me in my career is once you work in that environment and you find a place that is very tied to a value system, that walks the walk of that value system, that leadership and everyone is held accountable to those values and the ethics and the morals and the purpose around why you're in business, it's really hard to unsee that.
Very hard.
You can't go backwards and go, okay, I'm going to accept less than that. You know, and I think that's been in a lot of the people that I've worked with in coaching CEOs or coaching C-suite executives. That's the challenge that I've given to them is, you know, what are you permissive about? Because that's what's speaking volumes. Whatever you're being permissive about, whatever you're not addressing is what's speaking the loudest about your culture to the people, to the people in the horseradish, right? And I think one thing, you shared a story with us, so I'll ask this leading question about manager training, leadership training, and how prescriptive, and look, that's my kind of what I do for a living, so let me just scout my own business. But I believe that it's complicated and people are driven to events and do this and do that. But you have a great story when you were asked to put together a leadership manual, I believe, as you built this organization and this business and this culture, that I think is a great illustration of the complexity of that.
You know, I've known this for a while because I'm a huge fan of Nordstrom's. And I don't know if you know that they only have one rule in their leadership development. Did you know this?
Yes.
Do you know what it is?
Is it do the right thing or
use your best judgment?
Use your best judgment, yeah.
Right? That's one. That's all you need. And the problem with these flat world managers, that scares them, right? It frightens them because they believe that if you try to do something that's that open-ended, that really requires people making personal decisions, that you're going to fall off the edge of the earth and die. That we need those thick manuals with lots of rules and lots of regulations and lots of policies. And I remember, like I said, I'm not a corporate restaurant guy. So here I was, and we had opened this restaurant that was clearly going to grow and become bigger. And the new CEO came and he put a stack of manager training manuals. This is the story, right? On my desk. And he said, listen, we need to do one of these. And we need to have it ready by such and such a time because I'm going to hire a whole bunch of new managers. And so I'd like you to do one of these for the company and present it to these new managers. And I thought, oh shit, this is just so not me, because I think that they were all Brinker manager manuals and stuff. And I thought, I've been through that, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I thought about it. And so I finally did the work, and I think that there was going to be 15 new people. And I showed up at the meeting, and the CEO was there, and the owner, Paul Fleming, was there. And I had created a 300-page manual. He said he wanted a manual like the ones that I was seeing. So I created a 300-page manual in a binder, and I put a really nice cover on it, and I put it in front of everybody's chairs. Then I put something on top of it so nobody would open it up, because I said, nobody open up anything. I want to introduce it to you before. And I very seriously looked at him and I said, okay, here's the deal. I'm really sorry to tell you this, but you're going to have to memorize every word in this new document that we created, this management training manual that we created. And I said, and you need to not only memorize it, but you need to make it part of your heart, because when you understand every word in this training manual, then you will really understand how to make us successful as we grow. And so I said, okay, you can open it. And they opened it up, and on the first page, in the center of the page, it said the word care. And then they turned the page, and it was the word care. One word, every page, 300 pages, care. I said, now memorize that, and we'll become successful. And the moral of the story is I didn't get fired. Because I really thought I was going to get fired for that. But that's what I had to offer them. That's really what they've all had these other training manuals, so they learned how to do all that stuff. But have they really understood the importance of caring in the culture that we were creating? Care about your customers, care about our business, care about your employees, care about yourself, care about each other, all of that. Just if we could just find a way to do that, and then let's measure it. Let's figure out what caring looks like. Let's figure out the behavior of caring, and then let's hire people who care, and let's develop people who care, and then let's inspire them to care even more. I knew that was what was going to be making us successful, and perhaps it did.
Yeah,
it's a great story.
I have a question based on that, and that is something that I know when you and I have conversations, we talk about being selfish, and that ultimately I believe that there's always a selfish reason why anybody does anything, right? And so there was a selfish reason why you did the manual that way, to some degree or another, right? There was a motivation, selfish motivation. What was the selfish motivation for you in doing that?
Well, we talked about the round world and flat world thing, but for me, it's really about creating a better world. And I realized that my concept, my idea of a better world was very simple for me. It was very selfish. It was just, I wanted to come to work every day and feel good about myself. That was simple. Like, I always knew that my better world was just coming to work and being judged on the quality of my work and not my waist size or who I was dating. I was very clear about what my better world was. I always knew that I just wanted to work in a place where I was valued for the quality of my contribution. So I became a manager, and then I became an owner, and then I started opening restaurants around the country. And I realized that in order for me to create that better world for myself, I needed to provide a better world for everybody around me. Not my better world, but their better world. And so a lot of people ask me, well, how do you know what people's better world is? Just ask them. You'll be amazed if you ask the people who work for you, like, what is your idea of a better world, a better place to come to work every day? You'll be amazed at how good they are at articulating what that means to them. So other people say to me, well, doesn't everybody have a different idea of what a better world is? And of course they do. But I'm not going to show up every day and work really hard to create a better world for people who don't care about their job. I'm not going to work every day to create a better world for somebody who doesn't care about our customers or their fellow employees. I'm not going to do that. So my job to create that better world for myself is to hire other people who are at least aligned enough and at least have an understanding of what their better world looks like that moves in the same direction. It's to hire the right people who have a belief of what a better world looks like that is similar enough to myself and each other that we're all moving together towards a better world. I think that this is really important because what I'm doing is I'm asking CEOs and business owners, and especially small business owners, embrace the selfish. Embrace what it is you want to come to work to every day. We all know what it's like to walk into work and not only work for an asshole, but work with a bunch of assholes. I remember people like not showing up for work and stuff. And I remember saying to my employees, listen, if you need a manager who's going to be an asshole to you, is going to yell at you for not showing up on time for work, go find another manager. Before P.F. Chang's, I worked at a restaurant in Palm Springs for the biggest asshole in the whole world, and I'm not going to mention
I
his
don't know about
No.
I was waiting for you to say. Stacey's like, I think I know who that is.
Trust me, and I'm not even going to mention his name was Kaiser. But no, I mean, I wouldn't say that because there's restaurants still in Palm Springs. The biggest asshole I ever worked with in my life, and I remember when I decided to quit, I walked in and I said, Kaiser, you're fired. And he looked at me and he said, you can't fire me. I'm the owner. I said, yeah, but I'm not quitting, Kaiser. I'm firing you as my boss, and I'm going to go find a boss who can treat me the way I want to be treated. It was a very selfish moment at that time, and he was shocked. But when I've hired people and I've opened restaurants, I've stood up in front of people and I said, listen, here's the deal. If you're not the right person for this job, I'm probably going to fire you. And if I'm not the right manager for you, fire me. Go find a different boss. Just don't ruin it for everybody else around you. And so, yes, this is all very selfish. I just want to come to work every day and feel good about myself, just like what I did when I was 16 and bussing tables. And I think everybody deserves that, especially if you're a leader. You deserve to be able to feel good about yourself every day you come to work.
Yeah.
Well, the beauty of that, though, is that, when you create, to bring this back to culture, when you create this culture and this selfish idea of creating the culture that you want to go to work and be a part of every day, well, guess what? It has the power of attracting like-minded people that want to be part of that same culture. You're going to find yourself slowly but surely surrounded by like-minded people that help embody that culture and help it continue to grow, continue to maintain what you want it to be. And the people who don't, if they happen to find their way in, they're going to be the sore thumb sticking out that everybody's going to be able to see, and you're going to be able to root those people out very quickly.
But I think what the three of us do is we create this clear vision of what that better world looks like. You know the story of the artist that carves animals out of wood? Do you know this story?
I don't think so.
There was somebody who was doing an article on this artist. She was writing an article about this artist that would take a single piece of wood and end up with a panther or a lion or whatever.
It's always amazing to me.
Yeah.
I have no skill in that area.
Yeah, it's amazing.
A lot of patience.
And
Yeah.
so she was interviewing him, and she said to him, how do you do this? How do you have a piece of wood and then ends up being an animal? And he said, okay, it's pretty easy. Here's what I do. Like if I'm going to carve a bear, I take this piece of wood and I stare at it until I can clearly see the bear inside the wood. And then the only thing I have to do is carve away everything that isn't the bear.
Sounds so simple.
Exactly. Well, the idea is as a manager, you need to have a clear vision of what's inside of there, what we're trying to create, and then just carve away everything that isn't that.
Yeah, I have a relevant like right now story, and we look at takeaways. We always look for like an action, and one thing I would compel you to do right now, I think what's happened in this crisis, this pandemic in COVID is for leadership, they've shown up in their true self, in their true colors. And I had a conversation with somebody the other day that was potentially going to be laid off. And we were talking about that stress. And I always view everything as a gift in some way, shape, or form. Doesn't mean it's not going to be challenging to navigate through that gift, but it could be a gift. And this person, he said to me, well, I just don't fit in. And I said, that's right. Because they don't deserve you. These are people that have made decisions during this time that are, forget selfish, right? That are narcissistic and egotistical. And the fact that you don't fit in that mold for me just represents what an amazing person you are. And you're right, you don't fit there. It doesn't feel good to be there. It doesn't feel aligned. Like he's not part of the bear, right? And he is some part of that particular organization that, again, the people that want to be there should be expected to stab each other in the back and drive with their ego and not listen to facts and reality and not really create a human connection. And so I would tell you, if you're in an organization, I'm not telling everybody to up and quit, but I am saying to evaluate. The takeaway from a prior episode was to really identify what drives you, what's your purpose, what fans your flame, what you love, and that's the work that you tend to do first. But take that one step further. Are you inside of an organization where you're, to use Tom's kind of example, are you part of the bear or are you not? And it probably feels like, I've been part of this before, where you feel like an outsider.
Absolutely.
You don't feel like you're part of the bigger picture because, quite frankly, you're not. You are you're an outlier to whatever the values and the culture are of that organization. And I think you can usually feel that. You can feel misaligned to the organization, feel misaligned to the leadership. I remember, you probably both have had this experience, probably with this Palm Springs restaurant owner. I had one. Oh,
you have no idea.
I have one job that I was at where I would get physically ill when I walked into the lobby to take the elevator. Like, I viscerally was ill. Now, knowing what I know now, I would probably never put myself through that for a long period of time, because this is about, we don't have that forever on this earth, and we should do things that we're passionate about, that we're aligned to, that feel good. We want to be with organizations that are aligned to making it a better place to be. I want to be aligned with organizations that have a purpose. But I think we've all been in situations where we settle for something that's significantly less.
Yeah, I think it comes down to comfort too. So a lot of times, it's scary. It's scary to look around and see that. And for a lot of people, especially right now, I mean, like you said, if you're even kind of lucky enough to still have your job, then it's a scary realization and a scary leap.
But the better world is not just about leadership. It's about you. Yes, if you're one of those people that is trying to create a better culture within your organization, that's the very powerful thing. But you as an employee also have decisions to make. I used to create what I called a no bitching culture, because I've learned that bitching is a lot like smoking. Secondhand bitching is as bad for you as just bitching yourself.
I'm using that on my teenagers tonight.
Yes.
I mean, secondhand bitching is not allowed here. Not even firsthand bitching. It's just as dangerous.
And so I put up a mirror in the back of the restaurant that said bitching section. Which was basically, if you want to bitch, just go stand in front of this mirror and do it, because nobody wants to be a part of that, because you are not part of creating this better world for them. Just leave it out of it. I think that empowering the employees to say, hey, listen, this is a no bitching zone, or just making a decision that I don't want to be part of an organization. Yeah, I worked with companies. I remember when I was a waiter working for a company, the employees were having a great time, but those customers were getting in the way of all the fun we were having. And I knew that it just didn't even make sense to me. And I was a waiter. Nobody's keeping me there. Go find your better world. interview the companies that you want to hire for to see if they're aligned with your idea, your selfish idea of what you want to come in and feel like every day. I think that's easy. But okay, so in 1989 or whatever, I was working at this horrible restaurant with the worst food in the world. The food was so bad that when I'd ask customers how their dinner was, if they liked it, I'd lose respect for them. Like, really? Seriously? And I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I was miserable. And I had no friends. I didn't like it being there. I was just very, very unhappy. And so I went to a movie on my night off by myself, of course, because I was by myself. I had no friends, really. And I was miserable, and I'm sitting in, and I went and saw this brand new movie that came out called Thelma and Louise, right? And if you remember it, Thelma and Louise...
Did you go drive off a cliff?
No, well...
Sort of.
Kinda.
Okay.
So I'm watching Thelma and Louise, and at the very beginning of the film, Thelma is complaining about how miserable she is and how her boyfriend won't let her do anything. And they're starting off on their road trip, and Louise looks over at her and says, "You get what you settle for," and then turned around. And I think the movie continued. I don't remember, because everything stopped for me. Like, all of a sudden, like in that theater, it just stopped, because I realized that everything that has made me unhappy right now is what I settled for. And that, yes, don't settle. And I walked out of that theater, and a month later, I was opening a new restaurant in Palm Springs, playing golf every day. Yeah, he was an asshole, but it was better than that.
It's incremental improvement.
And by the way, that's where I met Paul Fleming, who came to me and told me he was going to open a Chinese restaurant.
So all things, right?
Right.
Well, you're doing something for the world right now that I don't want to, only have a couple minutes left, that I don't want to be remiss in not mentioning, because talking about doing good, you have a project called the I'm Essential Project. And I think, again, I've said this 1,000 times in the last 2 days, so I'm just going to say it again. We need more now more than ever. We need good stuff. We need positive things happening. We need positive news, and to recognize people that are doing the essential work, especially during the time when there is really a shutdown, a complete, stay at home, a quarantine. There were people putting themselves and even their families at risk by going out and doing work. And so you started a movement that really moved your soul. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
It's very aligned to the Better World concept.
It is.
Absolutely.
I was sitting and doing a puzzle, and I realized two very important things. One of them was, I hate puzzles.
First realization.
Number one.
Just hate puzzles. What am I doing here? Second, what am I doing here? Like, I need to get up and do something that's going to make a difference right now. So I started thinking about all of the culture work that I've done and all of my belief system about creating a better world. And I thought, well, what can I do now? So I got a hold of a friend, and I thought, well, at the same time, the government had decided to use the term essential worker and non-essential worker.
Right.
And it made me mad, because I always knew my employees were essential. I didn't need the government to tell me who was essential and who wasn't. And then they were laying off people and sending them home, telling them they were going home because they were not essential. Like, come on. Isn't it bad enough that you're sending them home? But now you're going to give them this title, non-essential. And I don't use the word essential worker. I talk about essential people. I talk about essential community members or essential employees. Because, we've got essential workers at the hospitals and the firemen and the policemen. But there are essential people throughout your life, everywhere you go. So I called a friend of mine, John Floor, who's amazing, who is a graphic artist who created the I'm Essential stickers. Now we have I'm Essential buttons. And the idea is that we need to be responsible for delivering a sense of meaningfulness to our employees, to delivering a sense of pride and self-esteem, because I think that our employees are far more damaged than we even know.
I agree with that.
And I think that we want to, yes, I think you were talking earlier about how people are reacting to this. There's a lot of fear right now. A lot of people are freaking out. And I've had business owners say, I'm trying to keep my business open. I'm too busy for this.
Yep.
And I'm like, how are you?
Now more than ever.
Yeah.
How are you too busy to recognize how essential your employees are to your company? How could you be too busy? How do you possibly think you could open your business and keep your business open unless your employees understand that they are essential to that success?
Absolutely. We're running short on time. So
Of course.
what we want to do is we're going to link to your I'm Essential project on the podcast and on LinkedIn and on all of our channels.
Yeah, I want people to see it on
Yes.
on the Instagram.
Yes, on Insta, on
every
IG.
day, every day.
So Blaker and I are going to take some of these with us so that we can recognize people in our community that are essential, people that we interact with every single day, and send you some images. But that's what you're looking for people to do.
Yes, absolutely.
And recognize people that are essential. And we will maybe do a LinkedIn Live or some other extension of this to talk a little bit more about it and in a little bit more detail. But we will make sure we link to every place that they can find this movement.
I've been watching your podcast, and it's so great. Aren't we about halfway through, though? What do you mean it's almost over? I thought this was about halfway through.
We do. We try to be short and bite-sized, but
That's right.
we don't
No,
always.
you're doing a great job, and I think what you're doing is really essential. And I think, and I'm going to
appreciate
put
that.
you guys on my Instagram because you are essential.
Thank you.
And I think that we need to deliver meaningfulness to all the people in our lives.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Couldn't agree more.
We are so grateful for
Me
you
too.
joining us, and we will link to everything and make sure we're connecting with everyone so they can get involved in this project and all the other work that you're doing. And we're gonna wrap for today. So again, I'm Stacie,
And I'm Blake.
and we are going to see you next time. Hey guys, thanks for listening to our show. You can find Blake and I on social media channels at Blake Rayhans and at Stacie Mallon.
Be sure to follow Optimized AF on Instagram and rate and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. See you next time.